The lesson outcome for this video is I can graph quadratics in factored form. Okay, so we have been talking about how this right here is a quadratic function or equation, and we know this because our degree is 2. And in a previous unit, we actually went and factored this right here using our factoring skills. We would write the negative 12 off to the side, list all of its factors, and find the factors that give us this negative 4. Now, I've done that already for you. So this is what we call factored form of a quadratic equation. It's already factored for you. So what we're going to work on is just using this information to help us graph our parabola. Now in class recently we've been talking about the different parts of parabolas, and there are two main parts in our parabola that will help us graph this pretty easily. And that is if I can find the x-intercepts and if I know where the vertex is. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to work towards getting our x-intercepts and their vertex. And we're going to fill those pieces of information into the table. So just like we did in the first lesson for this unit, where we were just using table of values to graph our parabola. But now we're going to be specific about what the values are. These two values are going to be, in most cases, our x-intercepts. And then our third row here is going to be our vertex. Alright, so to find the x-intercepts, let's think for a minute. Our x-intercepts are points on this x-axis. What do we know is true about every point on that x-axis? Well, we know that every x-axis point has a y value of 0. A y value of 0. So we know that the 0 is going to be the y value, and now we need to find our x value. So the deal is we are going to plug in, just like we did in the first lesson, we plugged an x value in and found our corresponding y value. Well, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to plug in our 0 for our y value in the equation to find our x value. So we're going to go ahead and write a 0 in here for y, and then I'm just going to rewrite the rest of the equation in factored form. And now we have an equation that says 0 equals x minus 6 times x plus 2. Well, what we need to use here is something called the zero product property. Okay? And here is the zero product property. You're going to want to write that down. Okay? The zero product property means that when the product of two things is 0, then one of those two factors must be 0. So let me show you what I mean by that. If I have 3 times something, and I know the answer is 0, what does this value, this factor right here, have to be? 3 times what factor is 0? Well, the answer is it has to be 0. It has to be. That's the only option, otherwise we're not going to get 0. So 3 times 0 is 0. So the zero product property says that if we have an answer over here of 0, when two things are being multiplied together, this binomial factor times this binomial factor multiplied together gives us 0. That means one of those two factors has to be 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to rewrite our equation with x minus 6 equals 0. So saying that this factor is 0, or x plus 2 equals 0. Again, this x plus 2 factor, binomial factor, has to equal 0. One of the two binomial factors has to be 0 to make this equation true. And now all we need to do here is solve. Alright, so we're going to add 6 to this side and this side of this equation. They cancel here, and we're left with x equals 6. And we're going to subtract 2 from each side of this equation. Those cancel out, and we get x equals negative 2. So now we know that when y is 0, we have two options for x, which we figured might be the case because typically we will have two x-intercepts. So we're going to go ahead and put this 6 here and the negative 2 here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and plot those 2 points right away as my x-intercepts. So 6, 0 is right here, and negative 2, 0 is right here. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we are going to use the same skills as we did in a previous lesson. If we know where the two x-intercepts are, we can find the vertex, right? Because we know it happens to land in between them exactly in the middle of the two x-intercepts. So just like we did in the previous lesson, we are going to take and find the average of our x-intercepts, right? We're going to find the average of our x-intercepts. We're going to take 6 plus -2, and we're going to divide that by 2. So that will be 6 plus -2 is 4, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we now know that our x value that's directly in between these two x-intercepts, our x value is 2. So that tells us that our line of symmetry is through x equals 2, right? So we're going to put the 2 right here. We know our vertex is somewhere on this line. Now, if you remember from the previous lesson as well, how we find that is we go back to our original equation. You could go back to our factored form equation. That'd be fine. If you want to put 2 in both of these places and find the y value, that would work. Or you can put it into the original equation. Both will give us the same answer. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the original because we did some practice with that in class. And we're going to say, okay, 2 squared is 4. We've got 4. And then minus 4 times 2 is 8 minus 12. And when you add 4 minus, or when you subtract, I suppose, 4 minus 8 is -4, minus 12 is -16. So we get -16 for our y value, right? Y equals -16. So now we can plot that point at 2, -16, which is going to be here. We found our vertex. And now we are able to sketch the parabola because we know this will be the minimum point, that's the lowest point, and it's going to come up and go through this x-intercept this way and come up and go through that x-intercept that way. A little messy, but it's hard to do on my iPad. All right, more practice on this in class. I'm not going to do another example. I think if you want to watch this one again, make sure you understand the steps. That would be good. Otherwise, we will practice in class.